Back now at 7:11, and this week the country's top infectious disease doctors out with a dire warning: coronavirus cases on the rise in 21 states.
Right now, the next couple of weeks are going to be critical in our ability to address those surgings that we're seeing in Florida, in Texas, in Arizona, and in other states. They're not the only ones that are having a difficulty. Bottom line, Mr. Chairman, it's a mixed bag. Some good and some now we have a problem with.
President Trump hitting the campaign trail this week, addressing crowds in Tulsa, Phoenix, and Green Bay, claiming the country is through the worst of the pandemic.
We're doing so well after the plague. It's going away.
And we bring in political insider right now, Armstrong Williams, to discuss this and more. Good morning to you, Armstrong. So what do you make of the competing messages that we're hearing from the doctors and from the Trump administration about the coronavirus?
Well, good morning, Melanie. Well, the numbers don't lie. Obviously, in places like Texas, Governor Abbott is reconsidering his opening layout in the phases. I mean, you look at places like Florida and these other hot spots. So obviously, the numbers are surging. And so the president's statements don't match the reality of the situation. You have to understand the president is optimistic. The president exaggerates. He always puts on the best face. He wants Americans to feel good about the economy. He wants the economy to start back again. That was the strength of his presidency, was the low unemployment, the economic engine, and the coronavirus has come along and it just brought this to a screeching halt. And so I think in many ways the president is denial and he's just hoping that something is going to fall in place and all the numbers are going to add up. And that's just not adding up. And I would say to the American people, whether you're going to a protest, whether you're going to a sporting event, or whether you're attending the president's rally, you should use common sense. It is not wise to gather in a place when you're not wearing masks and you're not wearing gloves. You are at risk of contracting the coronavirus. Obviously, it's happening among a lot of young people. And in many ways, in some ways, some people say it's a good thing for them to get the virus because they can build up the antibody. Obviously, they're young enough to recover, but there are those who will have these preconditions and other issues that they don't realize they may end up dying. Those are the consequences. It doesn't matter what our elected officials tell us, we have to have a modicum of common sense.
But shouldn't we be relying on the president to set the tone for the country? I mean, masks were not required at his rallies this week. Social distancing was not in effect. And this comes as 8 of the president's campaign staffers were diagnosed with COVID-19, 2 of them on self-isolation. So this is not going away anytime soon.
Well, obviously, from the president's example, I think there are a lot of things that the president does a very good job at, and this is why he has such a loyal support among his base. I just think there's some things that the president should defer to Dr. Fauci, Dr. Carson, and his COVID-19 task. But I think in the end, no matter what our leaders tell us and what example they may set for us, in the end, we must decide these things for ourselves. Because listen, Melanie, we're in a very precarious situation, and I don't think for any reason we should shut the economy down. Because listen, you don't want to have an economy where you have both this illness, which creates a crisis, and you have an economy that continues to shut down that creates a different kind of crisis. People need to get back to work. People need to feel good about themselves, and people have to start living again. And we've got to learn to live with this virus because it's not going anywhere anytime soon. And we were foretold.
All right, I want to move on to this other area because another week of nationwide protests over racial injustice. President Trump pushing back against the toppling of Confederate-era monuments. He's called up the National Guard to protect them, and now he's calling for jail time for people who deface these statues. Protesters, they see this as a form of freedom of speech, but is this criminal activity as the president sees it?
Absolutely, it's criminal activity. You do not have a right to deface and destroy America's monuments. You can take that to Congress. You have a body, a legislative body in place where Eleanor Holmes Norton right now has put forth legislation to try to remove these statues to museums. I think the issue should be not removing the statues from these places, but increasing the statues. We should have statues that reflect what happened during the period of slavery and the jury segregation. We should have statues like Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman and others that reflect, because obviously a lot of these relics were removed over our history. They should be put back in place to remind people of our ugly history, and where all sides can realize they have something. Yeah, you have the Confederate. It reminds us of where we are. Removing those statues, Melanie, is not going to change anybody's hearts. It's not going to resolve the issue of race relations in this country. It's just an emotional issue, and 2 days later, it'll be something else. I agree with the president. Protect our monuments until the legislative body tells us something different.
All right, Armstrong, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much. Good talking with you today. And you can catch the Armstrong Williams Show. It airs every Saturday morning at 10:30 right here on WJLA 24/7 News. And we'll be right back.